Krillvex recovered his composure quickly, centuries of diplomatic training asserting themselves. Admiral Chen, the hegemony offers protection and guidance to developing worlds. Your preparations are impressive but unnecessary. Chen's smile remained fixed as she gestured to someone off-screen. The transmission widened to reveal a laboratory where alien technology, unmistakably hegemony in design, was being dismantled and analyzed by human scientists. 3 of your scout ships crashed on Earth in the past 70 years, Chen explained casually. We learned much from them, particularly about your tendency to classify resource-rich worlds as developing regardless of their actual technological status. Krillvex felt his secondary hearts accelerate as he recognized components from vessels reported lost during routine reconnaissance missions. The implications were staggering. Humans had been reverse engineering hegemony technology for decades while maintaining a facade of isolation. We would prefer peaceful relations, Chen continued. Earth has prepared a diplomatic delegation ready to discuss mutual cooperation. However, she paused as the camera panned to reveal a holographic display of the hegemony scout ship's vulnerable points, each marked with targeting data. We are equally prepared for alternatives. Lieutenant Zexera leaned close to Krillvex, voice pitched low. Sir, we're detecting active targeting systems locked onto our primary propulsion and communication arrays. Their weapons' signatures don't match any known configurations in our database. Curious designs, aren't they? Chen remarked, somehow having heard the whispered conversation. We found your standard shield harmonics rather predictable. Our engineers made some improvements. Krillvex made a decision that would later be credited with averting immediate conflict. Admiral Chen, the hegemony acknowledges Earth's unique situation. Perhaps a diplomatic exchange would be beneficial before discussing Earth's status within galactic society. Chen nodded approvingly. Excellent. We'll transmit coordinates for a neutral meeting location. Our delegation will arrive unarmed. Her expression hardened subtly. We trust yours will do the same. After the transmission ended, Krillvex studied the strange artifact the sensors had detected in Admiral Chen's office, a glass display containing what appeared to be primitive projectile weapons alongside modern energy armaments. The placard beneath it read, Humanity's Progress, from gunpowder to gravitic disruptors. Sir, Zexera ventured nervously. Standard protocol for primitive worlds is to demonstrate technological superiority and establish dominance. Should we request additional ships? Krillvex stared at the image, understanding dawning with chilling clarity. The display wasn't showing technological progress. It was showcasing an arsenal, one that had been deliberately concealed until now. No, he replied quietly. We will comply with their diplomatic requests and recommend the High Council do the same. He turned to his communications officer. And classify this encounter as threat level Omega. Omega, sir. That's reserved for apex predator species with spacefaring capabilities. Krillvex recalled the cold calculation in Admiral Chen's eyes, the casual way she'd revealed Earth's defensive capabilities. Not boastful, but matter-of-fact. Like a predator that doesn't need to bare its teeth to establish dominance. Trust me, he said grimly. We've awakened something that has been watching us from the shadows for far longer than we realized. And they've been preparing. Dr. Jean's presentation continued with evidence that made even the most battle-hardened hegemony commanders shift uncomfortably in their seats. She displayed intercepted transmissions from Earth's entertainment networks, historical documentaries about guerrilla warfare, wilderness survival techniques, and urban combat tactics freely available to their civilian population. Their children engage in activities they call camping, deliberately practicing survival in hostile environments without technology. She explained, displaying footage of smiling human youths constructing shelters from forest materials. They frame it as recreation, but the practical applications for combat scenarios are obvious. A military analyst stepped forward with additional findings. They're fiction, stories they create purely for entertainment. frequently centers around scenarios where humans overcome technologically superior invaders through improvisation and determination. The display showed clips from dozens of human films depicting exactly this scenario. You're suggesting they've been psychologically preparing their entire species for this encounter? Asked a hegemony counselor, mandibles clicking nervously. Precisely, Dr. John confirmed. And there's more. Their medical technology includes field techniques for treating combat injuries developed during centuries of warfare against themselves. Their soldiers are trained to remain operational despite injuries that would incapacitate our warriors. The intelligence officer who had been reviewing new data finally approached the council table. High Command, we've discovered something troubling in their global communication network. She displayed a series of Earth defense budgets spanning decades. These expenditures were public knowledge on Earth, but they represent only 30% of their actual military spending. The remainder was concealed in seemingly unrelated research initiatives. She highlighted specific programs. Project Prometheus, officially a deep space telescope array, actually an early warning system for detecting hegemony ships. Program Aegis, supposedly weather satellites, actually a planetary defense grid. Operation Antaeus, registered as geological research, actually developing weapons that can function from beneath planetary surfaces. An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber as the implications became clear. Humans hadn't just been developing technology, they had been developing it specifically to counter hegemony capabilities, systematically and secretly, for generations. Ambassador Krulvex, who had remained silent, finally spoke. During my meeting with Admiral Chen, she made a comment I initially dismissed. She said, "Earth remembers the Cydonia incident. We have no record of any hegemony contact with Earth, designated as Cydonia." The intelligence officer's expression shifted to alarm. Cydonia is a region on Mars, their neighboring planet. We lost contact with an exploratory vessel in that sector 300 Earth years ago. Supreme Commander Traz Dole growled dismissively. You suggest these primitives destroyed one of our vessels 3 centuries ago. Impossible. Not destroyed, the officer corrected, pulling up ancient records. The vessel reported unusual damage to its propulsion system before going silent. Its last transmission included an image of primitive projectiles, physical metal objects, embedded in critical components. Dr. Jean's eyes widened with sudden understanding. They've known about us for centuries. They shot down our ship with primitive technology, studied it, and began preparing. Their entire industrial development has been shaped around potential contact with us. Trasdol rose abruptly, towering over the council table. This changes nothing. If they've been planning resistance for generations, we shall show them how futile such planning is against the full might of the hegemony. As the commander stormed out, Ambassador Krulvex remained, studying the chess piece Admiral Chen had given him. He turned to Dr. Jean with a question that would later prove prophetic. What if everything we're seeing, even their apparent defensive capabilities, is still just what they want us to see? As the crippled hegemony fleet retreated to safe distance, the true extent of Earth's technological superiority became apparent. The disabled vessel's sensor logs revealed a defense network that had remained completely invisible until activation, quantum-linked satellites that could reposition instantly without traversing the space between points, submarine installations that generated localized gravitational distortions, and most disturbing of all, handheld weapons carried by Earth's orbital defense teams that could selectively disable electronic systems through unknown principles. On the command bridge of the hegemony flagship, Supreme Commander Traz Dole received the damage assessment with growing fury. How did they penetrate our shields? Our frequencies are randomized specifically to prevent targeted disruption. The chief engineer, still shaking from the encounter, displayed a salvage Earth drone smaller than a grain of sand. They've been studying us far longer than we realized, Commander. These infiltrated our ships months ago during routine patrols. They've been recording our shield harmonics, weapons signatures, even crew rotations. Trasdol smashed a console. Impossible. our scanners would have detected. "Sir," interrupted the science officer hesitantly, "the drones incorporate organic components that mimic space debris. Our sensors categorize them as background radiation particles." A communication burst from Earth interrupted the discussion. Admiral Chen appeared once more, but the backdrop had changed. She now stood in what was unmistakably a war room, surrounded by holographic displays tracking every hegemony vessel. Behind her, dozens of officers from different Earth nations coordinated a defense grid that extended well beyond lunar orbit. "Commander Trasdul," she addressed him directly, "we've completed our assessment of your fleet capabilities. Please note that our response utilized approximately 8% of Earth's defensive capacity. We've transmitted technical assistance to your damaged vessels, sufficient to ensure life support functionality during your withdrawal." The science officer confirmed with disbelief. "They've transmitted repair protocols calibrated specifically to our systems. The coding architecture suggests they understand our technology better than some of our own engineers." Chen continued with clinical precision. "We're also returning your boarding parties, the ones dispatched to our orbital platforms during the confusion. They're unharmed but sedated for their safety and yours." On cue, 20 transport vessels detached from Earth's defense platforms, each containing hegemony special forces that had attempted covert infiltration during the battle. The timestamp on their capture indicated they had been neutralized within seconds of their arrival. "One last item of note," Chen added, her expression hardening. "We've detected targeting solutions being calculated from your secondary command vessels. While we understand the impulse, we must inform you that Earth maintains a dead-hand protocol. Any planet-wide attack would trigger automated responses from our deep space contingency platforms, currently positioned near every major hegemony world." The tactical display confirmed her claim. Untraceable energy signatures had appeared simultaneously near critical hegemony infrastructure throughout the sector. Somehow, Earth had deployed weapons platforms throughout hegemony space without detection. Chen's final words were delivered not as a threat, but as a simple statement of fact. The hegemony has always assumed that less advanced species would be easily subjugated. We hope this demonstration clarifies that technological advancement and public visibility aren't always correlated. Earth has prioritized defense over entertainment value. As the transmission ended, an ensign approached Trasdul with a secured communication. "Message from Ambassador Krulvex, her. He's requesting permission to initiate genuine diplomatic protocols with Earth leadership." Trasdul stared at the slowly restoring systems, realization dawning that the humans had calibrated their attack precisely, damaging enough to demonstrate superiority while deliberately avoiding casualties. They hadn't been fighting to destroy. They'd been conducting a carefully controlled experiment to evaluate hegemony capabilities. And they had found those capabilities wanting. The hegemony biological specialist's presentation took an unexpected turn as she displayed genetic analysis of human tissue samples covertly collected during diplomatic exchanges. Their DNA contains markers suggesting deliberate self-modification dating back at least 1,000 years, she explained, highlighting specific sequences, not through technology as we understand it, but through a process they call selective breeding, systematically encouraging traits they deemed valuable. "What traits?" demanded a council member. "Pattern recognition, stress adaptation, pain tolerance, but most concerning," she magnified a particular genetic marker. "Is this sequence associated with what humans call creativity? Their neural pathways form connections at rates 5 times higher than any hegemony species when presented with novel problems." The Chamber's AI projected a simulation comparing problem-solving approaches between hegemony engineers and human counterparts. Where hegemony solutions followed established protocols, human approaches routinely broke conventional patterns, creating entirely new methodologies. A cultural anthropologist stepped forward with additional findings. Their entertainment, what humans call fiction, primarily explores hypothetical scenarios. They intentionally expose themselves to imaginary problems to develop adaptive thinking. Their most celebrated thinkers are those who can envision what does not yet exist. She displayed Earth's patent repository, billions of innovations spanning centuries, many seemingly impractical until technologies caught up with concept. They imagine solutions before identifying problems, she explained. We design responses to specific threats. They create contingencies for threats they've never encountered. Ambassador Krulvex, who had been granted emergency council speaking privileges, inserted a data crystal into the central console. Admiral Chen provided this as a gesture of good faith after our initial confrontation. It contains Earth's historical military archives, freely given. The display filled with thousands of strategic simulations, ancient battles, modern conflicts, and hypothetical extraterrestrial engagements stretching back centuries. What stunned the Council was the familiarity of certain scenarios. They precisely mirrored the hegemony's standard invasion protocols, defensive formations, and fleet configurations. They'd been preparing for us specifically, Krulvex explained, not just technologically, but psychologically and strategically. They've wargamed every possible encounter with a species exactly like ours. A military analyst highlighted one simulation from 3 centuries earlier, a hypothetical defense against weaponry nearly identical to current hegemony systems. How could they anticipate our technological development so accurately? The intelligence officer who had been reviewing historical records provided the answer. The Cydonia vessel wasn't just studied for its technology. They reverse-engineered its navigational database, extracting the locations of hegemony worlds. They've been remotely observing our technological evolution since before we achieved unified government. Most disturbing was the simulation labeled Protocol Iron Fist, Earth's contingency for full-scale interstellar war. It detailed a strategy not of territorial conquest, but of precise, overwhelming strikes against leadership infrastructure with minimal civilian casualties. The simulation predicted hegemony surrender within 6 days. Ambassador Krulvex addressed the stunned council. We assumed humanity's reluctance to expand beyond their system indicated technological limitations. The truth is more troubling. They've been constructing a fortress world, a perfect defensive position with observation posts throughout our territory. They weren't trapped on Earth. They were lying in wait. He retrieved the chess piece Admiral Chen had given him, understanding its significance at last. In their strategic games, the most dangerous piece is often the one that appears least mobile until the perfect moment to strike. I believe humanity has been playing a very long game indeed. Supreme Commander Trasdul, who had remained silent throughout the revelations, finally spoke. You suggest we should fear these humans because they think differently, because they imagine threats. The hegemony has conquered worlds that communicate through crystalline hive minds and species that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. We will not be intimidated by clever primates. As he stormed out, the biological specialist whispered to Krulvex, he doesn't understand. The humans' greatest weapon isn't their technology. It's that they've spent their entire evolutionary history preparing for threats from within their own species. They've been honing their skills against themselves, the most dangerous prey of all. As Earth's transmission spread across hegemony space, the response proved more devastating than any weapon. On Nvidia Prime, philosophical collectives gathered in public squares, their crystalline communication nodes pulsing with unprecedented activity as they processed the implications. On Tellurate trading hubs, merchants suspended commerce to witness Earth's revelations, their profit algorithms recalculating potential alliances with this dangerous new variable. Most crucially, the transmission reached the syndicate worlds, 3 systems officially neutral but long suspected of harboring anti-hegemony sentiment. Their response was immediate: activation of long-dormant defense systems and transmission of diplomatic recognition to Earth. Back on Earth, Admiral Chen convened with the Unified Defense Council in their underwater facility beneath the Pacific Ocean, a command center designed to remain operational even if the planet's surface became uninhabitable. Representatives from Earth's major powers reviewed the hegemony's scrambled communications, now easily intercepted through backdoors installed in their systems during the brief military exchange. 17 hegemony worlds are experiencing civil unrest, reported General Kagawa, displaying live footage of protests. Their information control systems were designed to filter external transmissions, but never anticipated internal distribution. And the hegemony leadership? Chen asked. A holographic display showed Supreme Commander Traz Dol rallying his loyalist forces, preparing for a full-scale attack. They've activated reserve fleets from their core systems, approximately 2,700 vessels, significantly more than our initial estimates. Chen nodded, unsurprised. Time to deployment. 36 hours at their maximum sustainable FTL. And our contingency platforms. Dr. Sarambiki, head of Earth's Special Weapons Division, stepped forward. All 73 platforms report ready status. The causality inversion devices are primed but inactive. A murmur ran through the council at mention of the CITs, weapons so classified that most military personnel believed them theoretical. Based on principles discovered during examination of the Sidonia vessel's damaged drive system, they could selectively alter probability fields within defined spatial parameters, effectively convincing matter that it existed in a different configuration. We maintain our position that the CIDs should remain deactivated, said the UN Secretary-General firmly. Their deployment would violate our ethical protocols. Chen agreed. They remain our final option, not our first response. She turned to a communications officer. Prepare a direct channel to Ambassador Krulvex. I believe he's ready to discuss alternative resolutions. The transmission was established with surprising ease. Krulvex had been waiting for their call. His expression betrayed exhaustion and concern. Admiral Chen, I speak unofficially. Supreme Commander Traz Dol has labeled me a traitor for advocating diplomatic solutions. His image flickered as he transmitted from a secured location. Hegemony data systems have fragmented following your broadcast. Many worlds no longer trust central authority. The hegemony can still avoid further conflict, Chen replied. We've observed your reserve fleet mobilization. We understand it's meant to restore confidence, not necessarily to attack. Krulvex's expression revealed surprise at this insight. How could you possibly? He stopped himself. Of course. You've been monitoring our emergency protocols for centuries. We prefer to call it due diligence. Chen answered with the faintest smile. Ambassador, we're transmitting a proposal to your secure channel. It outlines a transition framework for the hegemony to evolve into a cooperative alliance rather than a domination structure. Krulvex received the document with visible shock. This is remarkably similar to reforms proposed by Nvidian philosophers 3 generations ago. Reforms that were suppressed by hegemony leadership. We know, Chen replied simply. We've been listening for a very long time, waiting for the right moment to help those reforms succeed. She leaned forward. The hegemony doesn't need to end, Ambassador. It needs to transform, and you can lead that transformation with Earth's full support. For the first time since the crisis began, Krulvex felt something beyond fear. The humans hadn't just been preparing for war. They'd been preparing for peace, studying the hegemony's internal politics, identifying potential allies, and crafting a transition plan that could succeed where generations of internal reformers had failed. They hadn't just created weapons to destroy the hegemony. They'd created a pathway to transform it. The captured hegemony assassins found themselves in a facility unlike any they had encountered in their extensive training. No visible restraints held them, yet they remained immobilized by precisely calibrated gravitational fields. The chamber walls displayed real-time footage of their failed mission, alongside data about their specialized genetic enhancements and weaponry, information that should have been impossible for humans to obtain. Admiral Chen entered alone, carrying no visible weapons. She studied them with professional interest rather than anger or triumph. Your strike team was impressively equipped, she noted, activating a holographic display of their neural architecture. These combat-enhanced synaptic pathways, designed to process tactical information 30% faster than standard hegemony soldiers. Yet you never stood a chance. Do you understand why? The assassin leader, a specimen bioengineered for both combat and intelligence gathering, maintained disciplined silence. Chen continued undeterred, because while your enhancements were impressive, they were also predictable. Your neural architecture was designed by hegemony scientists to excel against known threats, but humans are not a known threat. We think differently. She displayed combat footage showing the Earth operatives moving in patterns that made no tactical sense by hegemony standards, until the pattern's purpose became devastatingly clear. They had maneuvered the assassins into position for maximum vulnerability, while appearing to react randomly. You were defeated by chaos theory, Chen explained. Your enhanced brains seek patterns, predict responses based on optimal tactical doctrine. Our soldiers were instructed to incorporate deliberate randomness, to make choices that sacrifice short-term tactical advantage for long-term strategic gain. A side door opened, revealing one of the diplomats who had neutralized the assassination team. She appeared ordinary now, wearing a standard uniform rather than diplomatic attire. Commander Lakshmi participated in 7 major conflicts before being selected for this operation, Chen explained. Her specialty is asymmetric response, specifically, developing counter-tactics against technologically superior forces. 2 years ago, she wrote a dissertation on neurologically enhanced combat units and their inherent vulnerabilities to chaos pattern engagement. The assassin leader broke his silence. You anticipated our specific attack methodology. We anticipated 57 potential methodologies, Chen corrected. Your approach was Scenario 23, a standard hegemony infiltration pattern against high-value diplomatic targets. We've been studying your tactical doctrines since we retrieved your combat manuals from the Sidonia vessel. Meanwhile, across hegemony space, Supreme Commander Traz Dol's position deteriorated rapidly. The failed assassination attempt, broadcast throughout the galaxy, had turned even loyal military commanders against him. 3 sector fleets had declared neutrality, and the Nevidian and Tellurid homeworlds formally announced withdrawal from the coalition. In his increasingly isolated command center, Traz Dol received the status update with cold fury. The humans have turned our own people against us through manipulation and lies, he declared to his remaining loyalists. They present themselves as victims while orchestrating the hegemony's dissolution. His chief strategist hesitantly presented the latest intelligence. Sir, we've detected unusual activity around Sol's outer planetary bodies. They appear to be activating previously dormant installations throughout their system. Surveillance footage showed massive structures emerging from Jupiter's moons, orbital platforms materializing from Saturn's rings, and what appeared to be an entire artificial planetoid decloaking beyond Neptune's orbit. They're revealing their full defensive capabilities, the strategist explained. Our initial assessments drastically underestimated their military infrastructure. These installations have existed for decades, possibly centuries. Traz Dol studied the footage with growing realization. The humans hadn't built these defenses in response to hegemony discovery. They had constructed them methodically over generations, concealing them until this precise moment, when revealing them would have maximum psychological impact on wavering hegemony forces. They're not just fighting our ships, he whispered. They're fighting our resolve. His decision was made. If conventional warfare couldn't defeat these humans, he would employ the hegemony's most forbidden weapon, the World Breaker, a planet killer officially decommissioned, but secretly maintained as the ultimate contingency. Prepare the singular strike package, he ordered. If humanity wishes to reveal its true face to the galaxy, let them do so as their world burns. Earth's counteroffensive reached its most critical phase as Special Operations Team Theta approached the hegemony's most closely guarded installation, the Nexus, a quantum computational array that coordinated all military operations across 7 systems. According to intelligence gleaned from captured databases, no non-hegemony species had ever breached its defenses. Captain Maya Okafor, leading the 12-person infiltration team, studied the installation's schematics as their stealth vessel maintained position just outside detection range. Conventional wisdom would suggest this facility is impenetrable, she noted to her team. Fortunately, we don't subscribe to conventional wisdom. Their approach vector exploited a vulnerability no hegemony engineer had considered, a maintenance schedule gap occurring once every 4.3 standard years when automated systems briefly recalibrated. The window lasted precisely 8.7 seconds. "We're bypassing their outer defenses entirely," explained Lieutenant Park, the team's technical specialist. "Instead of trying to crack their security, we're synchronizing with it, inserting our entry precisely when their systems expect scheduled maintenance drones." The maneuver required split-second timing and coordination, with 6 other Earth teams simultaneously targeting key infrastructure across hegemony space. As Admiral Chen had explained during the mission briefing, "We're not conducting simultaneous strikes for tactical advantage alone, but for psychological impact. The hegemony leadership needs to understand that nowhere in their territory is beyond our reach." As Team Theta breached the Nexus's outer perimeter disguised as maintenance units, alarms remained silent. They navigated through automated defense systems not by disabling them, but by matching their broadcast signatures to expected maintenance patterns, effectively becoming invisible by becoming expected. Meanwhile, aboard his command vessel, Supreme Commander Traz Dole received increasingly desperate reports from installations across hegemony space. Human strike teams had penetrated facilities previously considered impenetrable, not through overwhelming force, but through precisely targeted infiltrations exploiting obscure procedural vulnerabilities. "Sir," his aide reported with undisguised alarm, "Earth forces have secured the Kappa 9 weapons research facility. They've accessed the prohibited technology vaults." Trasdol's expression darkened. "Did they destroy the prototypes?" "No, sir. They cataloged them, marked certain designs as potential war crime violations according to something they call Galactic humanitarian protocols. They left behind documentation detailing which weapons technologies violate these protocols and which are considered acceptable under their ethical frameworks." Before Traz Dole could respond, priority alerts flooded the command console. Human forces had secured the hegemony's central communications hub, the primary shipyard at Andorian Prime, and most critically, the Ascension Protocol facility housing the hegemony's leadership succession records and contingency governance systems. Back at the Nexus, Captain Okafor's team reached the central processing chamber, a vast crystalline structure housing the quantum core that coordinated all hegemony military logistics. Rather than destroying it, they executed their primary mission: installation of a specialized interface dubbed Prometheus Protocol. "Uplink established," confirmed Lieutenant Park. "Transmission is live across all hegemony networks." Throughout hegemony space, military and civilian communication systems simultaneously activated, broadcasting a single message to every connected device. The transmission contained not threats or demands, but complete, unaltered records of hegemony leadership decisions spanning centuries, internal communications revealing systematic deception of member species, exploitation of resource worlds, and suppression of technological advancements that might threaten central authority. Most damaging were the succession protocols revealing that the hegemony's leadership structure had been deliberately designed to maintain dominance by the 3 founding species while creating the illusion of representational governance. As the information spread, previously loyal military units across the hegemony began standing down, refusing commands from central authority. The careful mythology of benevolent guidance that had sustained the coalition for millennia unraveled in hours. On Earth, Admiral Chen watched the cascading effect with grim satisfaction. "Sometimes the most effective weapon against tyranny isn't firepower," she observed to the Defense Council. "It's truth." The Galactic Confederation's inaugural summit concluded with an unprecedented ceremony. Representatives from 27 formerly subjugated species presented Admiral Chen with artifacts from their worlds, not as tribute, but as symbols of newfound partnership. The gesture carried profound significance. Under hegemony rule, such cultural treasures had been systematically collected and displayed as symbols of conquest. As formal proceedings ended, Chen found herself approached by Zexra, the former lieutenant who had first scanned Earth's defenses during that fateful first contact. Now serving as Krillvex's diplomatic attaché, he carried himself with the confidence of one who had witnessed history's pivot point. "Admiral, there's something that has puzzled many of us," he ventured. "Your species possesses technologies that could have established Earth as the dominant power in this sector centuries ago. The causality inversion devices alone could have subjugated dozens of worlds. Yet you remained isolated in your system until we discovered you." Chen led him to a quiet balcony overlooking Lake Geneva, where Earth's ancient peace institutions had once mediated human conflicts. "Walk with me, Zexra. There's something you should understand about humanity's journey." She pointed to the rebuilt Palace of Nations. That structure stands on the ruins of institutions that tried, and often failed, to prevent humans from destroying each other. For most of our history, we were our own greatest enemies. Our technological development was driven by competition between rival powers, like the hegemony's early formation, Zexra noted. "Similar, but with a crucial difference," Chen replied. "The hegemony united through conquest. Earth united through painful recognition of our shared vulnerability. We realized that our ingenuity in creating weapons had outpaced our wisdom in using them. We came within moments of self-annihilation multiple times." She activated a small holographic projector displaying Earth's historical timeline, the progression from tribal conflicts to global wars to the brink of nuclear apocalypse. 2 centuries ago, humanity faced extinction by our own hands. In that darkest moment, we made a choice to channel our competitive nature into defensive rather than offensive capabilities, to develop technologies that could protect Earth from any threat, including ourselves, while establishing ethical frameworks for their use. The timeline continued, showing the discovery of the Sidonia vessel and humanity's subsequent unified focus on preparing for potential contact. We didn't leave our system because we recognized our greatest weakness. The same drive that made us formidable defenders made us dangerous explorers. Our history suggested we couldn't trust ourselves with offensive power on a galactic scale. Zexra considered this. Yet when threatened, you revealed capabilities beyond anything in our records. "Because we remained civil by choice, not necessity," Chen explained. "The technologies you've witnessed, from our gravity manipulators to the probability fields, they were developed with strict ethical constraints. Each advance required corresponding developments in control systems, ethical frameworks, and failsafes. The most significant revelation came as Chen showed him classified historical footage, Earth's unified government voting on whether to expand beyond the solar system a century earlier. The decision had been to wait, to ensure humanity's competitive instincts had truly been channeled into constructive purposes. We chose isolation until we could trust ourselves," Chen concluded. "The Sidonia incident showed us what waited among the stars, powers that might view us as resources rather than equals. So we prepared, hoping for peaceful contact, but ready for the alternative." As the Confederation delegates departed Earth for their home systems, they carried with them not just diplomatic agreements but a profound lesson. Earth had demonstrated that true civilization wasn't measured by technological dominance, but by the wisdom to constrain one's own power, to remain civil even when capable of overwhelming force. In his final address before returning to oversee the hegemony's peaceful transition, Secretary-General Krillvex encapsulated what many had come to understand. The human's greatest achievement wasn't developing technologies that could defeat us. It was developing the restraint not to use them until absolutely necessary. Perhaps that is the true mark of an advanced civilization, not what you can destroy, but what you choose to preserve. As Earth's defense grid returned to its quiet vigilance, Humanity continued its patient self-improvement, now joined by allies rather than isolated by necessity. The predator species that had learned to leash its own ferocity stood ready, civil, but never again to be mistaken for weak.